Hey, Charlie and Nikki.
Now, whatever comes to these mics is going to go in there. Screen sharing. That's only if you share your screen, and then
Do I have to share a screen?
if you
Do you have
share,
the slides up?
yeah, but then you won't be able to.
Well, last time we figured that out.
Only if you have like two.
Oh, shoot, we wanted it to, the camera can't see it.
Oh, so like if it was up there. I think what we can do is just post whatever you want into the chat.
Yeah. Unless, when? Yeah, from last March. Check your email.
So it's on.
I don't have a hard copy. Right. Right. No, that's not what I want to do.
Thank you, Artie. Yeah, my good. They are.
Just double check everything.
Yeah, what's up?
Nice to meet you. So, everything looks good. Is that you? When we fix the audio on Zoom, cannot hear the speakers. They're not speaking here. When they speak directly.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Anthony Driver, and I currently serve as the president of the Community Commission for Public Safety and Accountability. I'd like to thank everyone for joining. Us tonight for our monthly, our May monthly public meeting. And we will call the commission meeting to order at 6:37, and we will begin with the call of the roll. Commissioner Brown, who is virtual.
Present.
Commissioner Driver is present. Commissioner Gomez. Present. Commissioner Williamson.
Present.
Commissioner Nellis. Present. Commissioner Terry. Commissioner Tracoso. With 5 members of the Community Commission for Public Safety and Accountability present, we have a quorum and we can conduct the public business, the commission's business. The next item of business is public comment. If you would like to share something related to the commission's work on public safety and accountability, you have a few options. You can speak at a public meeting. You can also submit comment in writing by emailing your comment to Community Commission Public Comment at cityofchicago.org, or you can bring a copy of your comment to one of the commission public meetings and give it to someone on the commission staff or a commissioner. People who wanted to speak tonight during the public comment period were asked to submit their names in writing earlier tonight. Names are then drawn at random by a member of the commission staff. Speakers will be called in the order in which their names were drawn. If your name is called to offer public comment, we ask you to approach the microphone and line up in the order in which your name is called. When it's your turn to speak, please say your name and then spell your name and then offer your comments. Each speaker will have 2 minutes. We have allotted a total of 20 minutes for public comment. For folks who may not be able to come down to the microphone, please try to get either myself, the commissioner, or someone on my staff attention and who will bring your microphone. And for our first public comment, first and only, we have Sydney Brooks. Mr. Brooks.
I have a question.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Is there anyone else who would like to comment at this time? We've reached the end of our public comment period. We thank you. We thank you again to Mr. Brooks and those who come and make their voice heard. With that, we move on to our next order of business, the approval of the minutes. Before today's meeting, draft minutes of the commission's meeting, which is held on March 30th, 2023, were shared with all commission members. Are there any corrections to the draft minutes that have been circulated? If there are no corrections, is there a motion to approve the minutes of the commission meeting held on March 30th, 2023?
Second.
Commissioner Nellis has moved and Commissioner Gomez has seconded to approve the minutes of the commission's March 30th, 2023 meeting. Is there any debate on the motion?
Privilege. I think we're going to switch mics so that we can hear you better.
Test.
Thank you, sir.
Is there any debate on the motion to approve the minutes for the March 30th, 2023 meeting? Hearing none, we'll now move to a vote. Those in favor of adopting the motion to approve the minutes of the commission's March 30th, 2023 meeting, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it and the motion carries. The minutes for the March 30th, 2023 meeting are now approved. Will be new business. We'll be discussing the process of selecting the former chief administrator and police work members. And now I will pass it over to Commissioner Liz.
No, they all work, just one is loud one.
Hi, good evening, everybody. The first part of this process is making sure that we comply with the parameters of the consent decree. So we're going to review that really quickly. As you know, Chicago is currently under a consent decree. It's news to no one. The consent decree is a court settlement from 2019 requiring the Chicago Police Department and the municipal government of Chicago to do a broad overhaul of how policing works in Chicago and to implement long-lasting reforms to police training, policies, and practices. The consent decree has 799 paragraphs, the vast majority of which apply to CPD. However, there are some paragraphs that apply to the commission. Lucky for us, there's only two. First, there's paragraph 525, which governs the appointment of the COPA chief, and it specifically calls for the creation of a permanent selection process for the COPA chief and requires that the views and recommendations of community stakeholders be taken into account when the process is created. There's another paragraph, paragraph 532, which governs the appointment of police board members. Paragraph 532 specifically calls for the creation of selection criteria for police board members, which the city fulfilled in 2019, and a demonstration that those criteria are the basis for the future selection of police board members. The job of showing compliance with these two paragraphs now belongs to the commission, because the 2021 ordinance that created the commission gave us the power to appoint the COPA chief administrator and the power to nominate candidates for the police board to the mayor. Demonstrating the completion of these reforms under the consent decree is a responsibility that we take very seriously.
Selecting the leader of COPA and the members of the police board is an important part of ensuring accountability over policing and public safety. COPA, which stands for the Civilian Office of Police Accountability, is responsible for receiving and what?
Like, 1 second, we're trying to fix the audio because the audience can't hear you.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, just 1 second.
Beth, try now.
Try now.
Okay, test. Can you hear me?
Okay, thanks. Go ahead.
Should I start over or just pick up where I was?
Start over, please.
Okay. Selecting the leader of COPA and the members of the police board is an important part of ensuring accountability over policing and public safety. COPA, which stands for the Civilian Office of Police Accountability, is responsible for receiving and investigating complaints of police misconduct. COPA is also responsible for investigating every time a police officer fires a gun in a way that could hit someone, when a person dies or is seriously injured in police custody, or as a result of police action, and when there is an allegation of an improper search and seizure, and when there is an allegation that someone was illegally denied access to a lawyer. After conducting investigations, COPA issues disciplinary recommendations. The police board, which is a 9-member public body, is responsible for deciding cases of police misconduct when the superintendent of CPD files charges against a police officer and when the COPA chief administrator and the police superintendent don't agree about how an officer should be disciplined. Both bodies help to ensure accountability, fairness, and transparency in how Chicago addresses police misconduct. To fulfill the commission's duties, we have created 2 draft policies. One outlines the commission's proposed selection procedures for appointing the chief administrator of COPA. The other outlines the commission's proposed selection procedures for nominating the candidates to the police board. Both include an emphasis on community engagement as part of the selection processes. That means when we embark on the work of picking the next COPA chief and members of the police board, we are making a commitment to include you in the process, to ask you what you want in these officials, and to bring your insights and interests into the evaluation. We are doing this not only for the purposes of the consent decree, but also because it's plain and simply the right way to do our work. Our ongoing work to bring more people onto the police board will be better off with a formal policy written down on paper. And while we currently have a COPA chief administrator in Andrea Kirsten, and we hope she's not leaving anytime soon, someday the commission will face the task of appointing a new chief. Having an official policy in place will make us better prepared to do that work when the time comes. In addition, the policies will bring transparency to prospective candidates, stakeholders in the world of policing, and the community at large.
Hello, everyone. Now to talk a bit about the next steps with regard to the police board. Our aim is to,
reflect for the record that Commissioner Terry is present and Commissioner Troncoso has joined us via Zoom. So now all 7 members of the Community Commission are now present. You can go ahead. Jose.
Sure, thank you. So as I was saying, now to talk a bit about next steps with regard to the police board. Our aim is to collect feedback on the draft policies with the aim of adopting final versions at our January 27th public meeting. The next step in this process is for us to hear from you about each of our draft selection policies. Here's how. Number 1, you can submit public comment online. We will post both draft policies on our website along with instructions for how to send in your thoughts and feedback. We will collect public comment online for at least 30 days. In addition, you can deliver public comments at our next commission meeting. Like we said, the earliest we plan to adopt final policies will be at our July 27th meeting. That means you will have the chance to share comments with us at our June 29th meeting. In addition, you can talk to your district councils. Hopefully, you are all aware of the recently inaugurated district councils representing each of the 22 police districts. By law, district councils must hold monthly public meetings, they must gather public input, and they must submit findings and recommendations to the commission. We will be sending both policy drafts to all 22 district councils, along with a request for input from them and from their constituents. So please contact your district councils, look out for news from your district councils, and attend your district council meetings. In addition, our website includes a web page for every district council that lists the names of your district council members, notices and agendas of upcoming meetings, and a link to sign up for updates. So please check out that new section on our website. You can also feel free to reach out directly to commissioners and commission staff. The email to do that to commission staff is communitycommissionpubliccomment@cityofchicago.org. If you have any additional questions about this, please approach us after the meeting. Thank you very much for helping us achieve greater compliance with the consent decree and reform our system of police accountability. Thank you.
Thank you, Isaac. Are there any questions for commissioners on this particular item, this particular report?
Just a quick correction. I believe that Commissioner Troncoso might have said. Sorry, just a quick correction. I think there might have been a mix-up. I think in one of the points that Commissioner Troncoso pointed out as a way of hearing feedback, he mentioned that the final version would be adopted at our January 27th public meeting, but I think the correct one was July 27th. Also for the staff, sorry, for the people in the audience, are you all following what is being heard? I know it's a little bit hard to hear from this side, but can you hear what is being heard on this one? Okay, thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Commissioner Gomez. Our next order of business will be reports and updates. Commissioner Terry and I will begin with an update on the superintendent search. Commissioner Terry.
Thank you, President Driver. So the commission is responsible for conducting a nationwide search for the next superintendent of the Chicago Police Department. This process began with the input from community and will conclude with the commission sending 3 candidates to the mayor. Ultimately, it will be the mayor who selects the next superintendent from the group of 3 that we will send over. As part of this process, as we began to vet and select the most qualified candidates from all over the country, the commission has committed to incorporating substantial community input into the selection process. We hosted 7 community forums to gather community input on the qualities that they would like to see in the next superintendent. Next steps in this process. We use the information and questions that we gathered at these forums, along with information that we gathered from direct outreach to experts in the field of public safety, policing, police officers, established groups with an interest in public safety, including business, advocacy, and labor groups.
Thank you, Commissioner Terry. This week and next, they distributed to CPD personnel, including sworn and civilian employees. We're also meeting with representatives from the various police unions and workers to CPD personnel. On the interview process, should be active candidates and the criteria that is used to classify the applicants. Throughout the interview process. These are the public can submit to us. They are looking at to access it. Trouble accessing the QR. That's what they we're just shy of 200 surveys on police personnel. So we also closes on June 9th. We spoke with about 20 subject matter experts, including law enforcement personnel from Chicago and other places, academics, public safety practitioners, outreach workers, and lawyers. So to recap, the timeline, the application was posted on the website, and application Commissioner Terry and I soon after that application was received. On the applications have been selection chosen by the full commission. Commissioner Terry and I anticipate starting in the next 2 weeks. Once the first round of interviews is complete, the full commission will conduct a second round of interviews with the top candidates. The full commission will then meet in closed session until we choose the nominees to send over to Mayor Johnson for consideration. Nominations are due on July 14th. The list of applicants that will remain confidential. The commission will be sharing the names of the 3 nominees who will be sent to the mayor for consideration. The mayor must select a superintendent by August 13th. I have declined to pick any of the candidates the commission provided, and then explain in writing the reasons or not for picking any of the candidates. If the mayor rejects all of the candidates recommended by the commission needs to come up with a new list of 3. That process continues until the mayor picks a superintendent from the commission's list. Then the mayor's selection is subject to city council approval and confirmation. Are there any questions from commissioners on this item?
This isn't really a question, it's more of a comment to the rest of the commission as a point of consideration that I think we should begin to focus on, even though I recognize that we have a lot to do with the superintendent process. At some point, we're going to be done recommending candidates for superintendent, and we're going to have a new one. And I think that we need to really refocus and prioritize some of the goals and some of the issues that we've previously addressed in prior meetings as concerns that we have with respect to CPD with that new superintendent. And that I would like to propose this evening that one of the first priorities that we have for working with the new superintendent, and I'm going to call you out since you're sitting here, our current interim superintendent, Waller, is present tonight. And so I'm not a girl who likes to miss an opportunity. So I'm going to take it to say that in our meeting back in November, when we had an opportunity to review the CPD budget with the former superintendent, we spent a lot of time focusing on police allocation of resources. It was a great concern of this commission. And since that time, because of other responsibilities that we've had with picking police board members and now working on a new superintendent search, we unfortunately got away from our focus on police resources and allocation and police response times. The reason why I bring this up tonight is because, first of all, my condolences to all of the Chicago Police Department for the loss of Officer Preston. She was clearly a superstar and a person who, had great goals and aspirations to be a real giver to her community. Those of you who've come to these meetings have heard me say this before. I'm the mom of 4. I have 3 teenage daughters. I don't say this at all to rub sand in the eye of the CPD, because I know with every bone in my body that every one of the police officers that reports for duty on the Chicago Police Department wishes they could have been there to help her after she got shot. And the blame for her death does not lie with any police officer. It lies with the individuals who decided that her life was not worth more than the money they needed apparently for a barbecue. So I don't want to give any impression that I'm placing blame other than where it's due. But when I read that it took 30 minutes for someone to get to her, my heart almost stopped. Mostly for her mother, because if that was one of my girls, I would be screaming from the rooftops and ready to take down this whole city. And so I want to just emphasize that priority to the rest of the commission. I think it's really important that after we get past our current responsibility of picking the superintendent, that we refocus our attention on those police allocation issues that we raised during the budget hearing. The University of Chicago did do an allocation study. Superintendent Brown, in the course of our budget hearing, and it was reported on in the press, indicated that he felt that that allocation study did not appropriately represent some of the issues, and he actually indicated that he thought he needed a new allocation study. But there's an allocation study in CPD's possession right now that was done by the University of Chicago, an extremely well-respected group of researchers. And I would strongly encourage the Chicago Police Department to pay attention to that allocation study. And I would strongly encourage our commission to make sure that once this superintendent process is complete, that we refocus on our attention on that issue. Because it's certainly heartbreaking with respect to Officer Preston, but it's heartbreaking with respect to every other kid who dies on the street. And I think I speak for all of us here when I say that we're all sick of watching our young people die on the street. Thanks for letting me say that.
Any other comments or questions from commissioners on this particular item?
I will just add that the performance evaluation document that we finalized with Superintendent Brown at the end of January, I believe it was, does include that the superintendent would complete a workforce allocation analysis this year. So I just wanted to make that known, and that is something that Commissioner Brown and I are discussing and following up with in quarterly meetings with what will now be our
Any other comments from commissioners on this item?
This is just a quick point of clarification. Commissioner Wilson, I don't know if you were saying like, you propose as just, proposition open-ended, or were you making a formal motion to make that? And it's okay to not know. Okay, just something.
Thank you. I will, I'll just add that I share your concerns. And I'm 100% committed to figuring that out as well. Next, we have, we'll move on to the next order of business. We have Commissioners Loizan and Terry, who will be giving an update on the proposed Chicago Police Department policy on associations. I will pass it to Commissioner Terry.
Thank you. So Commissioner Loizan and I will be meeting with CPD next week to discuss the changes they have made to the association's order. This general order is the CPD policy that outlines the prohibitions for police officers' associations with criminal organizations and other groups that advocate for systemic illegal prejudice, oppression, or discrimination. The commission reviewed a draft of the order and suggested changes. CPD confirmed that they will incorporate the commission's changes and will look forward to reviewing the actual language of the general order. The commission also suggested that there be a process for the commission to monitor and assess the implementation of the new policy. And CPD also said that they would consider including the monitoring and assessment language in the policy. Commissioners will evaluate the current draft order and decide if this version is complete or if we should push for more changes. If the commissioners are satisfied with the CPD's changes and edits, we will post the policy for public comment. However, to learn more about this policy, you can go to our policy making webpage to view the rough draft of the policy, a summary, and our written comments and suggestions. Use the QR code up above. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Terry. Are there any comments, questions, or concerns from commissioners on this item?
For the commissioners that are working on this, thank you for your hard work. I know this is a very important piece of policy that we've been reviewing. Have we received any preliminary comments? And I don't want to get into the details because I know it's quite specific sometimes, but have we received comments or feedback from the department on their newest version of the policy? And if so, maybe when?
Just what I've outlined in terms of their consideration of the comments that we've proposed about our monitoring and assessment of the implementation of the policy. Yeah, and we have the meeting scheduled for next week, so we'll talk further and then we'll have another update at our June meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Commissioners Loizen and Troncoso who will be giving an update regarding the police board. With that, I will pass it to Commissioner Troncoso.
Thank you, President Driver. So as mentioned, the commission carries the responsibility of nominating candidates for the police board. The police board is an important part of our police accountability ecosystem. As we described earlier, the police board is a 9-person public body that reviews and decides on cases of police misconduct brought by the police superintendent against a police officer. It also decides on cases where COPA and the superintendent disagree on discipline, and it also decides on appeals by applicants to be police officers who were disqualified based on the results of a background check. It adopts rules and regulations for governing CPD, and it also holds monthly public meetings just like the commission. Our job is to bring 3 candidates to the mayor's office when a vacancy occurs or is approaching, or we can recommend a reappointment of a current member whose term is expiring or has expired. Earlier this year, the commission nominated candidates to fill 3 open seats on the police board. We sent a list of options to then Mayor Lightfoot, who selected 2 new police board members who the city council approved earlier this year in April. The application process for the police board is always ongoing. Individuals who qualify for the police board can apply at any time by submitting a cover letter, a resume, a list of 5 references, a completed eligibility form, and completed conflict of interest form as well. When a vacancy occurs or is approaching, we will consider all applications that we've received by that time. But right now, we are actively seeking applications. In August, we will have 3 potential seats for consideration. For 2 of those seats, the current member will be seeking reappointment. For the 3rd seat, President Guion Foreman will not be seeking reappointment because he's reached his term limit. That means that we will have at least 1 seat to fill with new candidates. We'll also consider new applications for the other seats in addition to reviewing applications for reappointment. For consideration, please submit your application this month for the most optimal consideration by emailing your materials to policeboardnominations@cityofchicago.org. Again, that's policeboardnominations@cityofchicago.org. The application materials are on our website, which you can access using the QR code behind me. But again, those required materials are cover letter, resume, list of 5 references, a completed eligibility form, and a completed conflict of interest form. Both those forms can be found on the website. To qualify for the police board, you have to meet the following criteria. You have to have been a resident of Chicago for the last 5 years, not a current or former employee within the past 5 years of the Chicago Department of Law, the Chicago Mayor's Office, CPD, COPA, or the Cook County State's Attorney's Office. You also have to have at least 5 years of combined documented experience, including postgraduate education in law, law enforcement, law enforcement oversight / police accountability, public policy, social work, psychology, mental health, community engagement, organizing, or civil rights. You also have to have a bachelor's degree or have the demonstrated ability to digest, analyze, and make decisions based on complicated written materials. You cannot have a conviction in a U.S. court for bribery, embezzlement, extortion, perjury, or any corruption-related charges. For any other conviction, you must be able to show successful rehabilitation. You cannot be a district council nominating committee member. You will need to disclose all possible conflicts of interest. And finally, you must show a variety of values such as character, integrity, impartiality, sound judgment, fairness, independence, leadership experience, community involvement, experience working with diverse populations, and the ability to work collaboratively in a group. So again, if you would like to apply, go to the website on the QR code and send applications and questions to policeboardnominations@cityofchicago.org. Thank you, and I'll hand it back to President Driver.
Thank you, Commissioner Troncoso. Are there any questions, comments, or concerns from commissioners on this item? Hearing none, we will now move on to Commissioner Nellis with an update regarding pretextual traffic stops. Commissioner Nellis.
Thank you, President Driver. So I want to start by saying that although we are a commission of 7 people, at this part of the process tonight, I am speaking for myself as Commissioner Nellis. Even 2 co-commissioners, Commissioner Brown and Commissioner Troncoso. A little farther. Thank you. Is that better? Okay, cool. So even the 2 there we go. I can hear it. The 2 co-commissioners, Commissioner Brown and Troncoso, working on this investigation with me, may not agree with everything that I say about this or any other commissioner-related business. That's okay. I would say that it's even good. We're 7 autonomous commissioners that represent different parts of the city and come to this work with a variety of backgrounds and experiences. For me, I come into this commission as a West Side resident and an attorney for 23 years, who has specialized exclusively in representing African-American youth under 25 years old on the West Side of Chicago for 14 of those years. Approximately 80% of those youth are male and 15% female, which reflects average arrest rates. The last 14 years, I've represented well over 1,000 youth, mostly African-American boys from the North Wandale area that have been arrested by the Chicago Police Department. This representation has included hundreds of police station visits to every police station in Chicago, including having a legal team placed inside 2 different Chicago police stations for 2 years. I've worked with the mayor's office and trained CPD detectives in provisions of the Juvenile Court Act. I also volunteered for First Defense Legal Aid and for roughly 10 years volunteering on overnight shifts that required me to visit every police station in Chicago and call to represent people in Chicago police custody. My representation has included investigating all of my cases as well as reviewing the investigation conducted by the Chicago Police Department for constitutional violations. This is the very nature of criminal defense representation, and this experience is one of the reasons I believe I was appointed to this commission, in addition to being part of numerous West Side collaborations. During the last 14 years, I've also lived in North Wandale. Prior to that, I lived in predominantly white communities that were insulated from many of the realities that we face today in Wandale, including but not limited to issues related to policing. So it is with that background that I come into this commission. 14 years of experience working directly with the Chicago Police Department and its practices and policies is what informs my work as a commissioner. This, coupled with everything we are learning as commissioners, shapes my decision-making and comments as a commissioner. Other commissioners come into this work with different backgrounds and experiences that shape their comments and decisions as a commissioner. That is good. Their perspective and knowledge are valid too. That is diversity of perspective, and it is healthy. We do not all need to agree, nor should we be required to do so. So with that in mind, I want to clarify that the investigation I'm leading is not an investigation to pretextual stops only. My fellow commissioners may not agree with this, and that is okay. Even Commissioners Brown and Troncoso, who are participating in this work with me, may not agree with me on everything. That is okay. For me, I initiated this investigation after and in direct response to the murder of Tyree Nichols in Memphis, Tennessee. Tyree was murdered by a police unit in Memphis called the Scorpion Unit And the entire interaction was captured on video by numerous body cams and street light cameras. This video was released publicly in February of this year. One of the benefits of body cam video is that it gives the public a very clear picture of what does and can happen when certain practices or policies are endorsed or implemented by local police departments. Good practices can be clearly identified, bad practices clearly exposed. Change followed by decisive action can be made because of body cams, streetlight cameras, and as we have seen, cell phone videos. Even though it can be hard to watch these videos are good for police departments all across the country and the general public. One element of Tyree Nichols' stop was certainly an unlawful, unconstitutional stop, and maybe we could call it a pretextual stop. But that was not the only concerning behavior. The unlawful stop was accompanied by rude, disrespectful, abusive language, aggressive and escalating action, throwing Tyree out of his car, cursing at him, threatening him, tasing him, and ultimately using deadly force. Unlike COPA, where the police board reviews misconduct after it happens, CCPSA commissioners are authorized to be forward-looking and investigate practices and policies that are unwanted for the purpose of working with the community and CPD to change and prevent them. I believe, Commissioner Nellis believes, that we have a responsibility as commissioners to make sure that any practices that are the same as or similar to the practices of that Scorpion unit in Memphis do not exist inside the Chicago Police Department. From the beginning, I have been clear that this investigation into Scorpion-like police practices, because the inquiry is not limited to whether there is a specific unit within CPD doing this kind of policing, but whether the practice exists within either culture, practices, or policies of the CPD. Part of this investigation involves, but is not limited to whether a specific unit like the Scorpion unit exists, but is also involves determining whether the practice exists in any local districts, area units, citywide units, or as a widespread cultural norm, or as a general or specific order. It is the practices and policies that need to be eliminated, not just units. In my experience living in North Lawndale for 14 years, as an attorney for 23 years, and a criminal defense attorney on the west side of Chicago for the last 14 years, coupled with what I've learned as a commissioner in the last 8 months, I believe it is a worthy use of my time to investigate whether these practices or policies exist within the Chicago Police Department, to what extent, who is endorsing and practicing them, where are they happening, and why, for the purpose of eliminating them. The Chicago Police Department has been subjected to numerous federal lawsuits in the last 8 years alone, including lawsuits for excessive unconstitutional pedestrian stops and patterns of practice of excessive force that discriminate against Black and Latino communities. CPD is currently under a federal consent decree, which requires them to change many of these practices. Nothing I am saying here is not supported by that federal consent decree already underway. And as a commissioner, I aim to support that work in this investigation. I also expect the Chicago Police Department to cooperate and work with me in this endeavor. I expect 100% of management and frontline officers to agree that the practices we witnessed in the Memphis Scorpion unit, both the unlawful stop and subsequent use of excessive force, are practices that should never exist in Chicago. I expect us to eliminate any such practices from the department. To the community, I would say if you have ever experienced something similar to what Tyree has experienced in Memphis, I would encourage you to reach out to me personally or another commissioner. I will listen to you. To be clear, I want to be clear that I'm not inviting to speak with you as an attorney offering you legal advice. That would be actually one ethical thing to do, to sit here from a microphone and solicit business. So I'm not doing that. I'm offering that as a commissioner conducting this investigation to listen to people's experience of the Chicago Police Department. So with all that now, I will provide an update on not just the work that I have been doing, but the work that Commissioner Troncoso and Commissioner Brown have been doing with me on this investigation to date. Together, the three of us have met with the University of Chicago Crime Lab and numerous leaders there, former Chief of Police Superintendents for LAPD, NYPD, national consultants and experts on police reform, New York University law professors that designed the Neighborhood Policing Initiative, NPI, our local NPI leaders, numerous meetings with Impact for Equity, formerly known as BPI, the American Civil Liberties Union, Free to Move Coalition, City Inspector General, 3 University of Illinois and Chicago professors, and have participated in collaboration with 3 community agencies that have held 19 listening sessions from December 2022 to March of 2023 that heard from 430 residents about current policing practices in Chicago. In March, I also convened a community meeting in North Lawndale to hear from a panel of 6 experts about this very topic. Throughout this time, the 3 of us have been reading numerous articles, reports, and research on these issues, including rereading the ACLU report from 2015, which I would encourage everybody to do, the DOJ investigation report in 2017, consent decree provisions, and Impact for Equity's reports from March and May of this year. This does not include other work that other commissioners and CCPSA staff have done on this issue that I may not be part of. We are still in the middle of this investigation. We will share what we have learned with the other commissioners and get their input before issuing any conclusions, findings, or recommendations. We don't know whether those conclusions, findings, or recommendations will be joined by other commissioners or the full commission when this is over. That will be decisions that our fellow commissioners will make when we have completed our inquiry. The last thing I want to report on is that we believe that it is not only important to identify a problem, but also to identify a solution. That is why at the same time of leading this investigation into scorpion-like police practices and policies, we also began researching constitutional community policing models to replace these unhealthy scorpion-like police practices. As we have said in previous public meetings, we believe that building up constitutional community policing practices is the same thing as eliminating scorpion-like police practices and vice versa. To eliminate scorpion-like police practices is to build constitutional community policing practices. They're 2 sides of the same coin. Therefore, when this is over, we intend to make 3 broad determinations. 1, do scorpion-like police practices exist in the Chicago Police Department? 2, if these practices do exist, what are they? Who is doing them? Who is endorsing them? And where are they being practiced? 3, then we will make recommendations for eliminating those practices and policies and implement constitutional community policing practices that are fully consistent with the federal consent decree.
Thank you, Commissioner Nellis. Are there any questions, comments, concerns from commissioners on this particular item?
Cliff, thanks for that thorough report. It's really helpful to understand the direction that this is going in. So we talked a little bit about this at the last meeting, and I just want to make sure that I am understanding. The term scorpion-like police practices, when you're using that term, based on your comments, I'm understanding that to mean a pretextual stop plus, or not even pretextual, an unlawful stop plus excessive force. Is that how you would define that term?
Can we get the other microphone?
So yeah, I think the answer is yes. I might add one element that is typical to these kinds of units. And that would be, I would say, the encouragement of, or the practice of high volume traffic stops, without regard to the quality or constitutionality of those stops. So, but using Tyree Nichols as an example, because I think it was captured so clearly on video, that was both an unlawful and unconstitutional stop followed by excessive force that ultimately led to lethal force. So I hope I answered your question.
Okay, sorry, this one's bad. Start way out here, maybe. Okay. Okay, so So I just want to make sure then that I'm correct. You're saying an unlawful stop that leads to either excessive force or lethal force, and that's what we're talking about when we say scorpion-like police practices, right? So do I have that right? Okay. So then my next question is that I saw the list of people that you met with and groups that you met with. And that's a lot of work. So thank you for doing all of that, because I know that's hugely time consuming. I just wanted to get like a better idea of what was the nature of those meetings and what kind of data are they providing? Because like when we talk about the BPI, which has a different name now, Impact for Equity, thank you. When we talk about their report, like I read their report, that report to me is a report on stops, period. It doesn't have the excessive force / lethal component to it. So can you just give me a little bit of, I'm just trying to understand like what's the data that you're looking at or looking for that would round out that characterization of like scorpion-like police practices. I'm just trying to understand where the source of that is. This one mic is annoying, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. So I would really try that. Testing, good? Yeah, okay, cool. So I would mostly agree with your characterization of the Impact for Equity's traffic stop reports, which to be clear was actually kind of 3 separate reports. There was the initial one in March, the update in May, and an appendix that's actually in a 3rd location. That's not a part of the actual update. I mean, it is referenced, but the actual appendix is 550 emails from department officials about the practice. So the data that we're seeking, so that is one group of obviously many that we've met with. The purpose of meeting with them has been to find out what were the sources of the data that they used to make the determinations, whether that data could start to point to who is doing this. Is our particular units responsible for it? Is it spread out throughout the city? Who's endorsing it? Why? And then the part that I said mostly, that I'm not sure I totally agree with, is they do have some data related to abuse of force, excessive force. In this research, they did not publish or comment on that much, but I do think that in our last meeting, they thought that that was a place we could go together. And so Commissioners Brown, Commissioner Tracosa, and I felt we want to work with community groups that are already doing this work. We don't want to reinvent any wheels. We don't want to send document requests to CPD that where those documents have already been requested. And certainly Impact for Equity, formerly known as BPI, has done a amount of that work. And so we've been meeting with them very specifically to actually build out, to answer that question. What other data sets should we be asking for? First, we want to find out, has anybody else asked for? Because again, we don't want to burden us or CPD with unnecessary administrative requests if that's already been produced. So let's find out what's there. Let's build on it. I think that the question that remains outstanding is part of the investigation is what correlation is there between high volume traffic stops, unconstitutional policing practices, and excessive force.
Okay, I have 2 more questions. Sorry. I was paying attention clearly. Okay, my next question then, based on that, that's helpful. This is just a comment for the commission. I'm wondering if it would be beneficial to all of us to have an opportunity to hear a presentation on some of that data at some point. I would strongly encourage that in a forum like this so that we can all hear it together. 2 more questions, and they're short ones. First is, you mentioned policies a couple times, and so I just want to get a little clarification. Is there a belief at the moment that there is a policy in CPD related to what you've defined as scorpion-like police practices? And is that, when you use that term policy, is that kind of like an unwritten policy, or do you believe that there's something within the confines of CPD policy that permits that conduct. And I ask that, given that Ramel and I are responsible for policy, I think that that would be something that we would most certainly want to be clued in on and make sure that we're also paying attention to.
Yeah, sure. So I want to say that a couple things for the full commission's benefit. One of the things I had shared is that we will share all of our data and any kind of thoughts or findings or conclusions, summaries, if you will, when we're done. So that is, you will have all that, right? You'll know the data sets, you'll have a very clear picture of what we've done, and then any summaries of it, and then potentially conclusions we may draw. What was your question again? I'm sorry. I just wanted to make sure that you all know that.
Yeah, I was just asking.
Oh, is there a
the policy, like,
Yeah,
is it
yeah.
something that currently exists? Is it written, unwritten? What does that look like?
Yeah, so I don't want to, I also want to be clear again, I'm still speaking for Commissioner Nellis here. So if Commissioner Brown or Commissioner Troncos wants to jump in, please feel free. I would answer that question by saying that is part of the investigation. Is there a general order or special order that may need to be amended? Is there one that maybe need to be removed? We don't know. That's part of the investigation. I think when we look at policies and practices, we want to see that. I will say this. This is again, Commissioner Nellis speaking. I think I would say a preliminary finding of a quote unquote policy. I think you could see in the 550 emails that were released by Impact for Equity, I think clearly shows that widespread across multiple leaders in the Chicago Police Department during this period of time were celebrating and championing high volume stops without any metric or KPI to question the validity, the constitutionality, the quality of those stops. It was literally saying this district had the most this month and thumbs up to them. Other districts that were low need to get their numbers up. So I would say that, is there a policy as far as general order, specific order? I don't know that we can say that. I certainly won't say that yet. Commissioner Brown, Commissioner Troncoso have anything, but I would say that I think the emails that were released would show that there's certainly widespread support from it in high leadership within the department during this period of time.
Okay, so before I ask my next question, I just want to go back to what you said right now, and I'm going to preface my comment by saying that Commissioner Nellis, who's, as I indicated, has done a ton of work on this, talked a lot in his initial comments about his experience as an attorney and how we all come from different backgrounds. So full disclosure, my background is the polar opposite of his. I was a prosecutor and I was counsel for the state police. So we definitely come at things differently. I want to be clear, given my background, that I don't disagree with you with respect to the data that we have been able to see regarding excessive street stops. I think you're 100% right. I think we need to look really closely at that. I think that there's a lot of information that's demonstrated that those kinds of routine street stops that arguably could have been considered a matter of policy are extremely problematic and lead to significant issues. 100% in agreement. Here's where I'm going to disagree. Street stops or vehicle stops and your definition of scorpion-like police practices are different things. They might be a precursor to what you're characterizing as a scorpion-like police practice, but it's just not the same thing. And so I'm concerned that we're giving the impression to members of the community that, and I know you're not speaking for the commission, but I'm concerned that we're giving the impression that there's a policy in place that somehow endorses scorpion-like police practices, which based on the definition we discussed includes an unconstitutional stop plus some excessive force and potentially excessive force that could lead to death. That's my worry here. So I just want to make sure, and I'm not asking this to be a jerk. I just want to make sure to be clear that at the moment, we have no reason to believe that there's any kind of policy, whether written, unwritten, in emails, in any of the data that we've seen that condones what you've defined as scorpion-like police practices. And I don't understand that to be the case, but I just want to make sure that we're clear, because if there is that, Cliff, that's earth shattering, right? So I just want to make sure we're talking the same language.
Yeah, I think I would answer that by saying that the jury is still out. That's the purpose of the investigation, and I think the data and we speak to, and ultimately probably some data requests that we send to CPD will answer that. I will say this: do I think that there is a document or an email or even a recorded conversation where somebody said, "I think it's a great idea to do high volume traffic stops regardless of the Constitution," and follow that up with excessive force and possibly lethal force? No, I don't think anybody would ever say that. I don't think anybody would actually ever believe that that's a good practice. That doesn't mean that it's not being, whether intentionally or unintentionally or otherwise, advocated for and practiced in a way that needs to be addressed and changed.
Totally agree with that. If that is for sure, if those things are occurring, I 100% agree. I'm just going to ask one more question, and it's solely for clarification purposes. But as we stand here today, do we have any documented evidence or any other information that confirms that we do have units in the Chicago Police Department that we could characterize as being akin to the Scorpion unit in Memphis? Do we have information that would support that, as we sit here right now?
I think the answer is that yes, there is some evidence, there's some data that would suggest these practices exist. I would rather not, I don't want to really go too much farther on this inquiry right now because we're still in the middle of the investigation. So I don't want to make it seem as if that is my finding or belief. It's certainly not speaking for Commissioners Troncoso or Commissioners Brown. But as I said, I think that's the purpose of the investigation. It would be too early to determine that that's not a problem or not a situation that could come up from this investigation. And I will also say this: out of meeting two things. One, I mentioned the experience I've had representing young people in West Side of Chicago for 14 years, because that clearly informs some of my thinking on this. I also referenced 19 community listening sessions in this last 6 months alone, with 430 residents. I can tell you for sure, harassment, beatings, chasings, unconstitutional stops, disrespectful, aggressive, escalating behavior was regularly reported. So to say that there's no reason to think that any of this is happening, I don't think is true. There's also, and I think, but again, I guess I do want to back up though, and I leave some time for either Commissioner Brown or Troncoso to respond. I think this, respectfully, Commissioner Loizon, I think this line of questioning is going too far in asking me to conclude that the investigation is over because there isn't evidence or data of that. I'm not willing to do that for sure. I'm also not willing to be very clear to this interim superintendent and everybody here in this room from the department and the community. I'm also not willing to say that I've concluded there is. So it's still pending.
Totally fair. I just want to make it clear. I never said that there's no reason to believe that any of this isn't happening. I didn't say that. And I don't believe that. So I'm sorry if you had the impression that that's what I was saying, but I don't think I said that out loud, and I certainly don't think it. If I misspoke, then I want to be clear that that's not my intention. And I actually am not looking for conclusions. I'm looking to understand where we're at as we stand here today. So I'm going to repeat the question that I asked because I think I got an answer to a different question. I don't I'm not asking if we have data to support the fact that that excessive force and stops are occurring. My question was do we have any reason to believe at this moment that we actually have units that have been created that are akin to the Scorpion-like units that, the Scorpion unit that was in play in Memphis? I'm just asking for information on whether or not those units are believed to actually exist right now.
So I'm gonna give the microphone back to Commissioner Nellis. I think I said Commissioner Brown has comments, also Commissioner Gomez, Vice President Gomez, as well as myself. So if it's okay with you, I'll pass it back to you to answer this question, and we're gonna move on to the question.
I'll just say very briefly, I think that based on some of the data that we've seen from Impact for Equity, it would suggest that these practices possibly, and again, preliminary, we're not concluded our investigation. I would say we have months left of work to do. Is possibly concentrated in units that could be, that would give concern that they could be like the Scorpion unit in Memphis.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I would just add here that, as Commissioner Nellis sort of laid out, the definition of a Scorpion-like unit is kind of intertwined with mass volume stops, which then potentially have a higher propensity to lead to unconstitutional force and excessive force. And so right now we have seen some evidence, of course, of mass volume stops, and that can give an environment that is more and we are still determining whether that can create an environment that is more conducive to unconstitutional stops. So I think we're kind of intertwining some definitions, and I'll pass it back to President Driver.
Commissioner Brown.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
We can hear you.
Great. That's a good thing. Thank you all for what I think is an important and fruitful discussion about all of this. I wanted to address one particular part of what Commissioner Nellis was saying, and that is I also read in depth the second report that Impact for Equity recently released. And I want to say that I have not drawn any conclusions yet about command staff at CPD. I don't understand how the whole orders thing works. And I'm not really one that has been used to following orders in my life. So I just want to make clear that before I draw any conclusions about people whose names were on those emails, I definitely want us to have specific conversations with the people whose names were listed and who sent some of those emails before I draw definite conclusions. I have some thoughts, I have some ideas, but I have not drawn definite conclusions, and I won't until after we've had a chance to speak to people about what may have been happening at that time that resulted in those emails being sent out. And again, I only say that because of the chain of command. And I don't know if somebody might have been sending an email because they were told to do that and they were following an order, or if that was something they actually believed in. So I would just want to make that distinction. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, great. So my comment's a little different than what's been sort of brought up. First of all, thank you to all the commissioners. I've been doing a lot of work on this issue. I think Commissioner Loiz's question and and her line of reasoning, and even Commissioner Nelson's response says something about how this body might think. I made this point last time, and I just want to kind of harp on this. When we talk about data, we shouldn't see it from the perspective of attorneys. And I'm sorry to the attorneys in the room, and I know that there's two sitting attorneys. Yeah, two sitting attorneys, but data doesn't answer questions in that way. To answer Commissioner Loizon's question, I think it does some more closely to what Commissioner Nellis does, right? And when you think of a research question, right? Think of a scientist. They're trying to figure out this question about one hypothesis. You can actually ask multiple hypotheses at the same time, and the data can give you answers to those hypotheses consequentially from one another. So actually, this is to Commissioner Nellis's point. You don't need to prove all of the hypotheses for you to find something, for there to be findings, right? That's what data's purpose is, for you to have some version of the hypothesis or some of a series of hypotheses to be proven. So in my mind, even though I would hate to find all of the hypotheses to be true, right? That there's not only high volume of stops, that they are disproportionately affecting people of color in the poorest areas of our city, and that they are leading to excessive uses of brutal force. You can just prove one, being there's a lot of high volume stops. If that is the finding, I think that says something about the department. And I want to be clear to the community members and to everyone that's listening, and even to the department staff that's present. A high volume, a number of stops that is disproportionate says something impactful about the city. I believe that law enforcement is partially here, and especially when we talk about constitutional policing, to enforce but protect people's rights. And the right of movement is a very important right that people in this city deserve. And so I think your line of thinking is right, but we shouldn't think of investigations or inquiries or whatever we want to call them from the perspective of attorneys, sorry, for the attorneys in the room, of like, we're answering this very specific thing, because that's just not a good use of data. That's not what data tells us. We have to have multiple levels of expected findings that we might prove or disprove one after. So just a point on data, because I think we oftentimes harp on this idea of like, what does the data tell us? To some extent, the data tells us whatever we wanted to see. And another point to complicate your investigation, Cliff, and by the way, I haven't read the reports yet. I'm excited to read them. I want to be transparent about that. But one thing that I found that is different from pretextual stops is that it's not just policies, but it's actually this centralization of strategies or the decentralization of strategies that plays a big role in how the department behaves. This is a conversation, this is based on a conversation that I had with some police officers when we were selecting, when we were talking about the selection of the superintendent, right? And the issue of having visible police lights all the time came up. And they brought up that this is something that might not be as centralized as people think. It might actually be something that commanders have more say over. I don't know if that's true. That's something that they brought up. So to complicate your investigation for all the commissioners in the room, I think there's something to be said about pretextual stops and its connection to centralization and decentralization of strategies. Because we might be looking for a specific policy, but what we might actually need to find is whether or not this difference in strategies at the entire department level is resulting in, you know, one district doing a high volume and another district doing a different volume. When we're thinking about this as commissioners, I think that's something important to consider in our search for superintendent, because that has a huge impact. And there's a lot of academic work that's written about whether centralization of strategies is more helpful for, you know, crime impactment or constitutional policing, as opposed to, you know, fragmentation and giving more autonomy to the different commanders. So something to look into aside from just one specific policy. And I know we're running short on time, so that will be the end of my comment.
So I will make very, very, very brief comments about this. One, I appreciate the work that you're doing, Cliff, Commissioner Nellis, Commissioner Troncoso, Commissioner Brown. I appreciate your line of questioning, Commissioner Loizon. For me, this is always hard, right? Because I obviously public speak a lot and I do a lot of different things, but it's a very visceral reaction from me every time we sit here as a Black male, born and raised on the South Side of Chicago, when we talk about scorpion-like units, scorpion-like practices. it's always very hard for me to remove myself from the situation because I know what that tape looks like and I envision that being me. So it is a very emotional like response that it garners from me. I also say that while I do appreciate all the work that you all are doing, I think this is important. Why we usually don't comment on investigations and inquiries until they are complete. Because as I'm sitting here listening to the back and forth, I'm honestly confused. I heard everything Cliff said. I was following him. I heard your line of questioning, but somewhere along the lines, I got lost in all of this. But what's stuck with me is how much that raised my temperature when we were talking about this conversation. And what I will say is that I do think as commissioners, and I'll speak for myself, we have a responsibility not to raise the temperature, specifically in our city, specifically in the polarized environment that we are in right now. If these things exist, we need to find out. We need to get to the bottom of it. We need to complete the investigation, and we should tell the public about that, and we should do something about it. We should move on it. But the emotional toll and what this does when we are talking about these things like this in the open and we don't actually have a real conclusion, we're saying something is happening, we're investigating something, but we don't have the answers. For me, that is very troublesome and very, very bothersome. And I can imagine a member of the public who, you know, was sitting and listening to this back and forth, and they're not leaving with any more answers than we started with. They came into it knowing that there was an investigation that was happening. That's pretty much where we're closing. So for me, I'm not giving any directive to any commissioners. I would just challenge us that when we talk about these things to talk about them with me than others. So take into consideration the public dialogue that's happening in our city right now. And the last thing is that we cannot give people a conclusion just yet. Maybe we should wait until we do have the conclusion. And again, that's not a word to anybody. I'm not telling anybody what to do, but that's just my personal take. Is that I do believe this discourse that we just had probably did more harm than good for this inquiry and for this commission. And before we close on this item, is there anybody else that would like to make a comment about it?
Thank you.
For the public, Mr. Williams. Where are we? With that, we will move on to our next order of business, which is miscellaneous business. I'll briefly discuss district councils. The district councils have begun having their monthly meetings. We encourage residents to visit the CCPSA website and to click the link entitled Information on District Councils, where you can find the name of your district council members, notices and agendas for meetings, and updates from your local district council. To connect with the commission via social media, you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Chicago CCPSA, or you can search Community Commission for Public Safety and Accountability. On Instagram is CCPSA_Chicago. That's the same for Twitter, and on YouTube is Chicago CCPSA. The commission's next regular meeting will be Thursday, June 29, 2023 at 6:30 p.m. Before I move to adjournment, is there any other comments, questions, or concerns from commissioners before we close? If there are no questions, or no further business before the commission, I would like to thank you all for joining us here tonight. We hope to see you on June 29th, and we hope you stay engaged and encourage people to join us in this work. With that being no further business before the commission, the meeting is adjourned.